know who that is? I said, no, I was a freshman. That's Colonel Larry Gibson, commanding colonel of Joint Forces of Howard University. I said, excuse me. So we go way back. I snapped to attention real quick and doing something. And so it's good to see all the authors here, all the writers, and I'll be very, very brief. If I may merge what I'm talking about, what Mr. Fields has asked me to talk about in terms of civil rights, with also a couple of mentions of my book, and I can do two things with one stone, if I may. My book is Under Color of Law, and it basically is a biography of my involvement in the civil rights movement, which started very early in my life. And it happened because my father, who was an engineer with the federal government, one of the first black engineers hired here in Maryland at Fort Holabird, we were living in Turner Station. He got transferred to Aberdeen, Maryland. I was in 12 years old, 13, in the 7th, 8th grade, was just having some girlfriends, was playing a little basketball. I was in my world, and all of a sudden my father says, we're going to Aberdeen. What? We go out into these woods, and there's nothing out there but white folks and skunks and deer and rabbits and so forth. So my whole life was shattered. And we didn't know Brown versus Board of Education had passed, and we had no idea that Brown versus Board of Education was not being recognized in Harford County. So we pull up to Aberdeen High School to enroll me in the school, and white folks are looking at us like we'd lost our minds. And my father says, you know, there is a black school, Dwight. Do you want to go to the black school? You want to go to white school? The only thing I could think about, I loved football. And the black schools didn't have football teams, but the white schools, as soon as we pulled up, I saw that there were goalposts, and so therefore it had to be a football team. And that's how we got involved into the civil rights struggle. Well, I guess it was my desire to play football. So anyway, we went into the school. We were denied admission, of course. We went back and went into federal court, and we had such distinguished attorneys as Baltimore's great Juanita Jackson Mitchell, Tucker Durham, Thurgood Marshall that Larry writes so much about, Jack Greenberg. They were the lawyers on my case. And in 2 years we won, and I was ordered admission into Aberdeen High School. And so going into the 10th grade, I didn't really have a problem that much because I was an athlete. And I say in my book, if you can throw the football, catch the ball, run the ball, hit the ball, kick the ball, or knock somebody out, white America will love you. And so I was a ball player, so I didn't really have a problem. My father caught living hell. They put rebel flags up in his office. They played Dixie when he walked into the room. They referred to him as boy. He took his telephone out of his office. They told him he would never be promoted again. He was also vice president of the NAACP for Harford County. Told him he'd never be promoted again. And for 14 years, he languished in that hellhole. Well, I had the opportunity to finish high school, go to college, go to law school, and come out, and Lord and behold, had the great fortune to see something that sparked my interest and enthusiasm, that we did have a legal chance, and I took his case. And we took his case into the United States Court of Claims, the second highest court in the nation, second only to the United States Supreme Court, in terms of monetary affairs. We won that decision on a 4-3 decision in 1973, which was the first case in the nation to award back pay to a federal employee. And it did it before Title VII was codified in terms of federal employees. We did it on executive orders, which is what Obama is talking about now. That was in 1973. We won the case, and that was a first in history. And the second in history was that it was the case which set the standard called evidentiary standards, the but-for test. In other words, in federal litigation at that time, if you proved that you were qualified for a promotion as an African American, then the burden of proof shifted to the other side to show why you were not promoted but for racial discrimination. So therefore, years later, I'm still practicing now, back in Baltimore City, I would go into federal court, and the judges or the administrators or the magistrates or commissioners would say, Mr. Pettit, by any chance, do you have anything to do with Pettit versus the United States? And I would, with a smile on my face, I would say, yes, George D. Pettit was my father, and I was my father's lawyer. And so, thank you. So when he was on his sick bed, he asked me to tell that story. And now, very briefly, and moving along, the name of the book, Under Color of Law, comes from, this ties into the Civil Rights era. In 1871, the American Negro, the freed slaves, were catching so much degradation and violence from the Southern America that President Grant, not Lincoln, President Grant, who had been General Grant, went into Congress and asked for authority to go into the South to crush the Southern resistance to the new free slaves. And that law became what is called 42 U.S.C. 1983. It's the Civil Rights Statute. Lend itself to criminal law as well as to civil law, which allowed federal troops and federal marshals to go into the South to, in fact, crush what was happening to African Americans in terms of lynchings and killings and murders, and all of it was being done under authority and under color of law. And so the bill was called the Civil Rights Act of 1871, or some knew it, and more popular, the Ku Klux Klan Act. And that's where the name comes from, Under Color of Law, because as we move into today's environment and into what's taking place today in America, I want to, in fact, send a message and write something which would articulate what's going on in this world in terms of African Americans. Not only to inspire those who run into obstacles and fight and push ahead in spite of the difficulties because of our race, but I wanted to lend the book and send the message that we have to be very, very vigilant as a people. This is a young nation, a nation that is very easily can be moved backwards. This is a young nation where people have fought and died for our civil rights. But if we look at this conservative Supreme Court, if we look at the 5-4 decisions, if we look at the dismantling of the Voting Rights Act, if we look at the dismantling of affirmative action, if we look at stand your ground laws, if we look at the prisons which are being packed through unfair and illegal sentencing, if we look at what's happening in terms of jobs and the economic plight of our people in America, this nation is taking us back. We're going back, and if we do not stand up as a people, we can very easily find ourselves in a backward movement instead of a forward movement. And so that's the reason for the book, the basis for the book, and what I hope to convey and hope to sound upon, that people will look at this as a historical analysis and find some interest and be able to take something from it as to where we are today with Black President Mr. Obama, where we're going, where we've been, and what this backlash in this nation, what this viciousness in this nation, what this arrogance of superiority that we see resurfacing, what is there, why it's there, and what we can do to, in fact, meet it head on. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit. I don't know if it's appropriate, but if you think it's okay, could you share with us some of the recent cases you worked on? I don't know if you can speak on the ones that's open, but some of the civil rights cases right here in Baltimore and Maryland, could you share, if you could, some of that information?
Sure, Mr. Cook. Well,